Welcome to this week's edition of You Opt to Know, the Daily Orange's opinion section podcast. I'm assistant editorial editor Michael Sessa, and this week I'm joined by our independent columnist Madeline Johnson.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about Madeline's most recent column about the mental health impacts of gun violence. So what made you want to explore the topic for a column?
Yeah, so in the news I saw recently that two survivors of the Parkland shooting within a week had killed themselves, and also a week or so after that, one of the people affected by the Sandy Hook shooting also killed himself. So I think it's really important that we look at not only how gun violence impacts victims, but how it affects entire communities.
Yeah, so one of the professors you talked to for the column introduced the topic of neighborhood trauma. So what is that concept, and what's being done in Syracuse to address that?
Yeah, so basically neighborhood trauma is what occurs within communities that have higher rates of violence and gun violence. So what Syracuse is trying to do specifically is build a sort of sense of community and have community centers specifically focusing on young people having mentors and access to different resources so that they can prevent people who might see the cycle of violence as the only way to get through their lives.
Sure. Yeah, and you argued that in your column since it takes so long for reforms to happen in terms of gun laws and things like that, that in the meantime we should focus on supporting those communities. So what sort of groundwork have you seen in that area, and how does the gun reform debate fit into that?
Yeah, so basically what's happening in Syracuse is that they have members of the council trying to advocate at the same time for different gun reform, specifically in the community, but also putting these programs in place that will sort of, after episodes of violence, they will have first responders to go in to try to dissolve the situation and things like that. So just trying to attack the issue on all fronts, not just only in the community or only with gun reform, but in all sorts of aspects.
Sure. And what changes do you think would be valuable in this area? What can Syracuse students or people in the Syracuse community do to help?
Yeah, I think specifically for Syracuse students, it would be really beneficial for them to go out in the community and look beyond campus and maybe perhaps visiting some of the different campus, or not campus centers, but the community centers that are around this area, and looking into the different sort of movements that are trying to eradicate this gun violence, specifically within the Syracuse community.
Sure. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. And as always, if you have any comments, questions, or if you want to send us a letter to the editor, you can email us at opinion@dailyorange.com. We'll see you next week.